Aldarion and Erendis. The sea longing came anew upon Aldarion, son of Tar-Meneldur, 5th king of Númenór, and he departed again and yet again from Númenór, and his mind turned now to ventures that might not be compassed with one vessel's company. Therefore he formed the Guild of Venturers, that afterwards was renowned. To that brotherhood were joined all the hardiest and most eager mariners, and young men sought admission to it even from the inland regions of Númenór, and Aldarion they called the great captain. At that time he, having no mind to live upon land in Armanelos, had a ship built that should serve as his dwelling place. He named it therefore Ambar, sea dwelling, and at times he would sail in it from haven to haven of Númenór, but for the most part it lay at anchor off Tol Uinen, and that was a little isle in the bay of Romena that was set there by Uinen, the lady of the seas. Upon Ambar was the guild house of the Venturers, and there were kept the records of their great voyages. For Tar-Meneldur looked coldly on the enterprises of his son, and cared not to hear the tale of his journeys, believing that he sowed the seeds of restlessness and the desire of other lands to hold. In that time, Aldarion became estranged from his father and ceased to speak openly of his designs and his desires. But Almarion, the queen, supported her son in all that he did, and Meneldur perforce let matters go as they must. For the venturers grew in numbers and in the esteem of men, and they called them Uindili, the lovers of Uinen, and their captain became the less easy to rebuke or restrain. The ships of the Númenórians became ever larger and of greater draught in those days, until they could make far voyages, carrying many men and great cargoes, and Aldarion was often long gone from Númenór. Tar-Meneldur ever opposed his son, and he set a curb on the felling of trees in Númenór for the building of vessels, and it came therefore into Aldarion's mind that he would find timber in Middle-earth, and seek there for a haven for the repair of his ships. In his voyages down the coast he looked with wonder on the great forests, and at the mouth of the river that the Númenórians call Gwathir, River of Shadow, he established Vignalonde, the new haven. But when nigh on 800 years had passed since the beginning of the Second Age, Tar-Meneldur commanded his son to remain now in Númenór, and to cease for a time his eastward voyaging, for he desired to proclaim Aldarion the king's heir, as had been done at that age of the heir by the kings before him. Then Meneldur and his son were reconciled for that time, and there was peace between them, and amid joy and feasting Aldarion was proclaimed heir in the 100th year of his age, and received from his father the title and power of lord of the ships and havens of Númenór. To the feasting in Armanelos came one Berengar from his dwelling in the west of the isle, and with him came Erendis his daughter. There Almarion, the queen, observed her beauty, of a kind seldom seen in Númenór, for Berengar came of the house of Baelor by ancient descent, though not of the royal line of Eros, and Erendis was dark-haired and of slender grace, with the clear grey eyes of her kin. But Erendis looked upon Aldarion as he rode by, and for his beauty and splendor of bearing she had eyes for little else. Thereafter Erendis entered the household of the queen, and found favor also with the king, but little did she see of Aldarion, who busied himself in the tending of the forest, being concerned that in days to come timber should not lack in Númenór. Ere long the mariners of the Guild of Venturers became restless, for they were ill content to voyage more briefly and more rarely under lesser commanders, and when 6 years had passed since the proclamation of the king's heir Aldarion, determined to sail again to Middle-earth. Of the king he got but grudging leave, for he refused his father's urging that he abide in Númenór and seek a wife, and he set sail in the spring of the year. But coming to bid farewell to his mother, he saw Erendis amid the queen's company, and looking on her beauty he divined the strength that lay concealed in her. Then Almarion said to him, "Must you depart again, Aldarion, my son? Is there nothing that will hold you in the fairest of all mortal lands?" "Not yet," he answered. "But there are fairer things in Armanelos than a man could find elsewhere, even in the lands of the Eldar. But mariners are men of two minds, at war with themselves, and the desire of the sea still holds me." Erendis believed that these words were spoken also for her ears, and from that time forth her heart was turned wholly to Aldarion, though not in hope. In those days there was no need, by law or custom, that those of the royal house, not even the king's heir, should wed only with descendants of Elros Tar-Miniatur, but Erendis deemed that Aldarion was too high. Yet she looked on no man with favor thereafter, and every suitor she dismissed. 7 years passed before Aldarion came back, bringing with him ore of silver and gold, and he spoke with his father of his voyage and his deeds. But Númenór said, "Rather would I have had you beside me than any news or gifts from the dark lands. This is the part of merchants and explorers, not of the king's heir. What need have we of more silver and gold unless to use in pride where other things would serve as well? The need of the king's house is for a man who knows and loves this land and people which he will rule." "Do I not study man all my days?" said Aldarion. "I can lead and govern them as I will. Say rather, some men of like mind with yourself," answered the king. "There are also women in Númenór, scarce fewer than men, and save your mother, whom indeed you can lead as you will. What do you know of them? Yet one day you must take a wife." "One day," said Aldarion, "but not before I must, and later, if any try to thrust me toward marriage. Other things I have to do more urgent to me, for my mind is bent on them. Cold is the life of a mariner's wife, and a mariner who is single of purpose and not tied to the shore goes further and learns better how to deal with the sea." "Further, but not with more profit," said Númenór. "And you do not deal with the sea, Aldarion, my son. Do you forget that the Edain dwell there under the grace of the lords of the west, that Uinen is kind to us and Ase is restrained? Our ships are guarded, and other hands guide them than ours. So be not overproud, or the grace may wane, and do not presume that it will extend to those who risk themselves, without need, upon the rocks of strange shores or in the lands of men of darkness." "To what purpose, then, is the gracing of our ships?" said Aldarion. "If they are to sail to no shores, they may seek nothing not seen before." He spoke no more to his father of such matters, but passed his days upon the ship Ambar, in the company of the venturers, and in the building of a vessel greater than any made before. That ship he named Palara, the far wanderer. Yet now he met Erendis often, and that was by contrivance of the queen, and the king, learning of their meetings, felt disquiet, yet he was not displeased. "They will be more kind to cure Aldarion of his restlessness," said he, "before he win the heart of any woman." "How else will you cure him, if not by love?" said the queen. "Erendis is yet young," said Númenór, but Aldarion answered, "The kin of Erendis have not the length of life that is granted to the descendants of Elros, and her heart is already won." Now when the great ship Halaron was built, Aldarion would depart once more. At this Númenór became wrathful, though by the persuasions of the queen he would not use the king's power to stay him. Here must be told of the custom that when a ship departed from Númenór over the great sea to Middle-earth, a woman, most often of the captain's kin, should set upon the vessel's prow the green bow of return, and that was cut from the tree Oyolare, that signifies ever summer, which the Eldar gave to the Númenóreans, saying that they set it upon their own ships in token of friendship with Ase and Uinen. The leaves of that tree were evergreen, glossy and fragrant, and it throve upon sea air. But Númenór forbade the queen and the sisters of Aldarion to bear the bow of Oyolare to Rōmena where lay the Palaron, saying that he refused his blessing to his son, who was venturing forth against his will. And Aldarion, hearing this, said, "If I must go without blessing or bow, then so I will go." Then the queen was grieved, but Erendis said to her, "Tyrrhenia, my queen, if you will cut the bow from the elven tree, I will bear it to the haven, by your leave, for the king has not forbidden it to me." The mariners thought it an ill thing that the captain should depart thus, but when all was made ready and men prepared to weigh anchor, Erendis came there, little though she loved the noise and bustle of the great harbor and the crying of the gulls. Aldarion greeted her with amazement and joy, and she said, "I have brought you the bow of return, Lord, from the queen." "From the queen?" said Aldarion in a changed manner. "Yes, Lord," said she, "but I ask for a leave to do so. Others beside your own kin will rejoice at your return as soon as may be." At that time Aldarion first looked on Erendis with love, and he stood long in the stern looking back as the Palaron passed out to sea. It is said that he hastened his return, and was gone less time than he had designed, and coming back he brought gifts for the queen and the ladies of her house, but the richest gift he brought for Erendis, and that was a diamond. Cold now were the greetings between the king and his son, and Númenór rebuked him, saying that such a gift was unbecoming in the king's heir unless it were a betrothal gift, and he demanded that Aldarion declare his mind. "In gratitude I brought it," said he, "for a warm heart amid the coldness of others. Cold hearts may not kindle others to give them warmth at their goings and comings," said Númenór, and again he urged Aldarion to take thought of marriage, though he did not speak of Erendis. But Aldarion would have none of it, for he was ever and in every course the more opposed as those about him urged it, and treating Erendis now with greater coolness, he determined to leave Númenór and further his designs in Vinalonde. Life on land was irksome to him, for aboard his ship he was subject to no other will, and the adventurers who accompanied him knew only love and admiration for the great captain. But now Númenór forbade his going, and Aldarion, before the winter was fully gone, set sail with a fleet of 7 ships and the greater part of the adventurers in defiance of the king. The queen did not dare incur Númenór's wrath, but at night a cloaked woman came to the haven bearing a bow, and she gave it into the hands of Aldarion, saying, "This comes from the Lady of the Westlands," for so they called Erendis, and went away in the dark. At the open rebellion of Aldarion, the king rescinded his authority as lord of the ships and havens of Númenór, and he caused the guild house of the adventurers on Ambar to be shut, and the shipyards of Romena to be closed, and forbade the felling of all trees for shipbuilding. 5 years passed, and Aldarion returned with 9 ships, for 2 had been built in Vinalonde, and they were laden with fine timber from the forests of the coast of Middle-earth. The anger of Aldarion was great when he found what had been done, and to his father he said, "If I am to have no welcome in Númenór, and no work for my hands to do, and if my ships may not be repaired in its havens, then I will go again and soon, for the winds have been rough, and I need refitment. Has not a king's son ought to do but study women's faces to find a wife? The work of forestry I took up, and I have been prudent in it. There will be more timber in Númenór ere my day ends than there is under your scepter." And true to his word, Aldarion left again in the same year with 3 ships and the hardiest of the adventurers, going without blessing or bow. For Númenór set a ban on all the women of his house and of the adventurers, and put a guard about Romena. On that voyage, Aldarion was away so long that the people feared for him, and Númenór himself was disquieted, despite the grace of the Valar that had ever protected the ships of Númenór. When 10 years were gone since his sailing, Erendis at last despaired, and believing that Aldarion had met with disaster, or else that he had determined to dwell in Middle-earth, and also in order to escape the importuning of suitors, she asked the queen's leave, and departing from Almenelos, she returned to her own kindred in the Westlands. But after 4 years more, Aldarion at last returned, and his ships were battered and broken by the seas. He had sailed first to the haven of Vignalonde, and thence he had made a great coastwise journey southwards, far beyond any place yet reached by the ships of the Númenórians, but returning northwards he had met contrary winds and great storms, and scarce escaping shipwreck in the Harad, found Vignalonde overthrown by great seas and plundered by hostile men. 3 times he was driven back from the crossing of the great sea by high winds out of the west, and his own ship was struck by lightning and dismasted, and only with labor and hardship in the deep waters did he come at last to haven in Númenór. Greatly was Númenór comforted at Aldarion's return, but he rebuked him for his rebellion against king and father, thus forsaking the guardianship of the Valar, and risking the wrath of Alce not only for himself but for men whom he had bound to himself in devotion. Then Aldarion was chastened in mood, and he received the pardon of Númenór, who restored to him the lordship of the ships and havens, and added thereto the title of Master of the Forests. Aldarion was grieved to find Erendis gone from Almenelos, but he was too proud to seek her, and indeed he could not well do so save to ask for her in marriage, and he was still unwilling to be bound. He set himself to the repairing of the neglects of his long absence, for he had been nigh on 20 years away, and at the time great harbor works were put in hand, especially at Romena. He found that there had been much felling of trees for building and the making of many things, but all was done without foresight, and little had been planted to replace what was taken, and he journeyed far and wide in Númenór to view the standing woods. Riding one day in the forest of the Westlands, he saw a woman whose dark hair flowed in the wind, and about her was a green cloak clasped at the throat with a bright jewel, and he took her for one of the Eldar who came at times to those parts of the island. But she approached, and he knew for Erendis, and saw that the jewel was the one that he had given her. Then suddenly he knew in himself the love that he bore her, and he felt the emptiness of his days. Erendis, seeing him, turned pale and would ride off, but he was too quick, and he said, "Too well have I deserved that you should flee from me, who have fled so often and so far. But forgive me, and stay now." They rode then together to the house of Berengar her father, and there Aldarion made plain his desire for betrothal to Erendis, but now Erendis was reluctant, though according to custom and the life of her people it was now full time for her marriage. Her love for him was not lessened, nor she retreat out of guile, but she feared now in her heart that in the war between herself and the sea for the keeping of Aldarion she would not conquer. Never would Erendis take less, that she might not lose all, and fearing the sea, and begrudging to all ships the felling of trees which she loved, she determined that she must utterly defeat the sea and the ships, or else be herself defeated utterly. But Aldarion wooed Erendis in earnest, and wherever she went he would go. He neglected the havens and the shipyards and all the concerns of the guild of venturers, felling no trees but setting himself to their planning only. And he found more contentment in those days than in any others of his life, though he did not know it until he looked back long after, when old age was upon him. At length he sought to persuade Erendis to sail with him on a voyage about the island in the ship Eambar, for 100 years had now passed since Aldarion founded the Guild of Venturers, and feasts were to be held in all the havens of Númenór. To this Erendis consented, concealing her distaste and fear, And they departed from Romena, and came to Andunia in the west of the isle. There Valandil, lord of Andunia and close kin of Aldarion, held a great feast, and at that feast he drank to Erendis, naming her Uenio, daughter of Uinen, the new lady of the sea. But Erendis, who sat beside Noneth, the wife of Valandil, said aloud, "Call me by no such name. I am no daughter of Uinen, rather is she my foe." Thereafter, for a while, doubt again assailed Erendis, for Aldarion turned his thoughts again to the works at Romena, and busied himself with the building of great sea walls, and the raising of a tall tower upon tall Uinen. Comindon, the light tower, was its name. But when these things were done, Aldarion returned to Erendis, and besought her to be betrothed, yet still she delayed, saying, "I have journeyed with you by ship, Lord. Before I give you my answer, will you not journey with me ashore to the places that I love? You know too little of this land for one who shall be its king." Therefore they departed together, and came to Amerie, where were rolling downs of grass, and it was the chief place of sheep pasturage in Númenór, and they saw the white houses of the farmers and shepherds, and heard the bleating of the flocks. There Erendis spoke to Aldarion and said, "Here could I be at ease." "You shall dwell where you will, as wife of the king's heir," said Aldarion, "and as queen in many fair houses such as you desire." "When you are king, I shall be old," said Erendis. "Where will the king's heir dwell meanwhile?" "With his wife," said Aldarion, "when his labors allow, if she cannot share in them." "I will not share my husband with the lady Uinen," said Erendis. "That is a twisted saying," said Aldarion. "As well might I say that I would not share my wife with the lord Orme of Forest, because she loves trees that grow wild." "Indeed you would not," said Erendis, "for you would fell any wood that is a gift to Uinen if you had a mind." "Name any tree that you love, and it shall stand till it dies," said Aldarion. "I love all that grow in this isle," said Erendis. Then they rode a great while in silence, and after that day they parted, and Erendis returned to her father's house. To him she said nothing, but to her mother, Nuneth, she told the words that had passed between herself and Aldarion. "All or nothing, Erendis," said Nuneth. "So you were as a child. But you love this man, and he is a great man, not to speak of his rank, and you will not cast out your love from your heart so easily, nor without great hurt to yourself. A woman must share her husband's love with his work, and the fire of his spirit will make him a thing not lovable. But I doubt that you will ever understand such counsel. Yet I am grieved, for it is full time that you were wed, and having borne a fair child, I had hoped to see fair grandchildren, nor if they were cradled in a king's house would that displease me." This counsel did not indeed move the mind of Erendis. Nevertheless, she found that her heart was not under her will, and her days were empty, more empty than in the years when Aldarion had been gone. For he still abode in Númenór, and yet the days passed, and he did not come again into the west. Now Amarion, the queen, being acquainted by Nuneth with what had passed, and fearing lest Aldarion should seek solace in voyaging again, for he had been long ashore, sent word to Erendis asking that she return to Armanelos. And Erendis, being urged by Nuneth and by her own heart, did as she was bid. There she was reconciled to Aldarion, and in the spring of the year, when the time of the Urukurme was come, they ascended in the retinue of the king to the summit of the Meneltarma, which was the hallowed mountain of the Númenórians. When all had gone down again, Aldarion and Erendis remained behind, and they looked out, seeing all the isle of Westernesse laid green beneath them in the spring, and they saw the glimmer of light in the west, where far away was Avalone, and the shadows in the east upon the great sea, and the Menel was blue above them. They did not speak, for no one, save only the king, spoke upon the height of Meneltarma. But as they came down, Erendis stood a moment, looking towards Emeria and beyond, toward the woods of her home. "Do you not love the Yozayan?" she said. "I love it indeed," he answered, "though I think that you doubt it. For I think also of what it may be in time to come, and the hope and splendor of its people, and I believe that a gift should not lie idle in hoard." But Erendis denied his words, saying, "Such gifts as come from the Valar, and through them from the One, are to be loved for themselves now, and in all nows. They are not given for barter, for more or for better. The Edain remain mortal men, Aldarion, great though they be, and we cannot dwell in the time that is to come, lest we lose our now for a phantom of our own design." Then taking suddenly the jewel from her throat, she asked him, "Would you have me trade this to buy me other goods that I desire?" "No," said he, "but you do not lock it in hoard, yet I think you set it too high, for it is dimmed by the light of your eyes." Then he kissed her on the eyes, and in that moment she put aside fear and accepted him, and their troth was plighted upon the steep path of the Meneltarma. They went back then to Armenelos, and Aldarion presented Erendis to Tar Meneldor as the betrothed of the king's heir. And the king was rejoiced, and there was merrymaking in the city and in all the isle. As betrothal gift, Meneldor gave to Erendis a fair portion of land in Emeria, and there he had built for her a white house. But Aldarion said to her, "Other jewels I have in hoard, gifts of kings in far lands to whom the ships of Númenór have brought aid. I have gems as green as the light of the sun in the leaves of trees which you love." "No," said Erendis, "I have had my betrothal gift, though it came beforehand. It is the only jewel that I have or would have, and I will set it yet higher." Then he saw that she had caused a white gem to be set as a star in a silver fillet, and at her asking, he bound it on her forehead. She wore it for so many years, until sorrow befell, and thus she was known far and wide as Tar Elistirne, the Lady of the Starbrow. Thus there was for a time peace and joy in Armenelos, in the house of the king, and in all the isle. And it is recorded in ancient books that there was great fruitfulness in the golden summer of that year, which was the 858th of the second age. But alone among the people, the mariners of the Guild of Venturers were not well content. For 15 years Aldarion had remained in Númenór, and led no expedition abroad, and though there were gallant captains who had been trained by him, without the wealth and authority of the king's son, their voyages were fewer and more brief, and went but seldom further than the land of Gilgalad. Moreover, timber was become scarce in the shipyards, for Aldarion neglected the forest, and the venturers besought him to turn again to this work. At their prayer Aldarion did so, and at first Erendis would go about with him in the woods, but she was saddened by the sight of trees felled in their prime, and afterwards hewn and sawn. Soon therefore Aldarion went alone, and they were less in company. Now the year came in which all looked for the marriage of the king's heir, for it was not the custom that betrothal should last much longer than 3 years. One morning in that spring, Aldarion rode up from the haven of Andunie to take the road to the house of Beregar, for there he was to be guest, and thither Erendis had preceded him, going from Armenelos by the roads of the land. As he came to the top of the great bluff that stood out from the land and sheltered the haven from the north, he turned and looked back over the sea. A west wind was blowing, as often at that season, beloved by those who had a mind to sail to Middle-earth, and white-crested waves marched toward the shore. Then suddenly the sea longing took him, as though a great hand had been laid on his throat, and his heart hammered, and his breath was stopped. He strove for the mastery, and at length turned his back and continued on his journey, and by design he took his way through the wood where he had seen Erendis riding as one of the Eldar, now 15 years gone. Almost he looked to see her so once more, but she was not there, and desire to see her face again hastened him, so that he came to Beargar's house before evening. There she welcomed him gladly, and he was merry. But he said nothing touching their wedding, though all had thought that this was a part of his errand to the Westlands. As the days passed, Erendis marked that he now often fell silent in company when others were gay, and that she looked towards him suddenly she saw his eyes upon her. Then her heart was shaken, for the blue eyes of Aldarion seemed to her now grey and cold, yet she perceived as it were a hunger in his gaze. That look she had seen too often before, and feared what it boded, but she said nothing. At that Númenór, who marked all that passed, was glad, for words may open wounds, as she said. Ere long Aldarion and Erendis rode away, returning to Armanelos, and as they drew further from the sea, he grew merrier again. Still he said nothing to her of his trouble, for indeed he was at war within himself, and irresolute. So the year drew on, and Aldarion spoke neither of the sea nor of wedding, but he was often in Númenór and in the company of the adventurers. At length, when the next year came in, the king called him to his chamber, and they were at ease together, and the love they bore one another was no longer clouded. "My son," said Númenór, "when will you give me this daughter that I have so long desired? More than 3 years have now passed, and that is long enough. I marvel that you could endure so long a delay." Then Aldarion was silent, but at length he said, "It has come upon me again. Aldarion, father. 18 years is a long fast. I can scarce lie still in a bed, or hold myself upon a horse, and the hard ground of stone wounds my feet." Númenór was grieved, and pitied his son, but he did not understand his trouble, for he himself had never loved ships, and he said, "Alas, but you are betrothed, and by the laws of Númenór and the right ways of the Eldar and Edain, a man shall not have 2 wives. You cannot wed the sea, for you are affianced to Erendis." Then Aldarion's heart was hardened, for these words recalled his speech with Erendis as they passed through Emeria, and he thought, but untruly, that she had consulted with his father. It was ever his mood, if he thought that others combined to urge him on some path of their choosing, to turn away from it. Smith may smithy, and horsemen ride, and miners delve when they are betrothed, said he. Therefore why may not mariners sail? If smiths remain 5 years at the anvil, few would be smiths' wives, said the king. And mariners' wives are few, and they endure what they must, for such is their livelihood and their necessity. The king's heir is not a mariner by trade, nor is he under necessity. There are other needs than livelihood that drive a man, said Aldarion, and there are yet many years to spare. Nay, nay, said Númenór, you take your grace for granted. Erendis has shorter hope than you, and her years wane swifter. She is not of the line of Elros, and she has loved you now many years. She held back well nigh 12 years when I was eager, said Aldarion. I do not ask for a third of such a time. She was not then betrothed, said Númenór. But neither of you are now free, and if she held back, I doubt not that it was in fear of what now seems likely to befall if you cannot master yourself. In some way you must have stilled that fear, and though you may have spoken no plain word, yet you are beholden, as I judge. Then Aldarion said in anger, It were better to speak with my betrothed myself, and not hold parley by proxy. And he left his father. Not long after he spoke to Erendis of his desire to voyage again upon the great waters, saying that he was robbed of all sleep and rest. But she sat pale and silent. At length she said, I thought that you were come to speak of our wedding. I will, said Aldarion. It shall be as soon as I return, if you will wait." But seeing the grief in her face, he was moved, and a thought came to him. "It shall be now," he said. "It shall be before this year is done. And then I will fit out such a ship as the Venturers made never yet, a queen's house on the water. And you shall sail with me, Erendis, under the grace of the Valar, of Yavanna, and of Orome, whom you love. You shall sail to lands where I shall show you such woods as you have never seen, where even now the Eldar sing, a forest wider than Númenór, free and wild, since the beginning of days, where still you may hear the great horn of Orome the Lord." But Erendis wept. "Nay, Aldarion," she said, "I rejoice that the world yet holds such things as you tell of, but I shall never see them, for I do not desire it. To the woods of Númenór my heart is given. And alas, if for love of you I took ship, I should not return. It is beyond my strength to endure, and out of sight of land I should die. The sea hates me, and now it is revenged that I kept you from it and yet fled from you. Go, my lord, but have pity, and take not so many years as I lost before." Then Aldarion was abashed, for he had spoken in heedless anger to his father, so now she spoke with love. He did not sail that year, but he had little peace or joy. "Out of sight of land she will die," he said. "Soon I will die if I see it longer. Then if we are to spend any years together, I must go alone, and go soon." He made ready, therefore, at last for sailing in the spring, and the Venturers were glad, if none else in the isle, who knew of what was done. 3 ships were manned, and in the month of Virese they departed. Erendis herself set the green bow of Oyolare on the prow of the Polaron and hid her tears until it passed out beyond the great new harbor walls. 6 years and more passed away before Aldarion returned to Númenór. He found even Almarion, the queen, colder in welcome, and the Venturers were fallen out of esteem, for men thought that he had treated Erendis ill. But indeed he was longer gone than he had purposed, for he had found the haven of Vineyard now wholly ruined, and great seas had brought to nothing all his labors to restore it. Men near the coast were growing afraid of the Númenóreans, or were become openly hostile, and Aldarion heard rumors of some lord in Middle-earth who hated the men of the ships. Now when he would turn for home, a great wind came out of the south, and he was borne far to the northward. He tarried a while at Mithlon, but when his ships stood out to sea once more, they were again swept away north, and driven into wastes perilous with ice, and they suffered cold. At last the sea and wind relented, and even as Aldarion looked out in longing from the prow of the Polaron and saw far off the Manotarma, his glance fell upon the green bow, and he saw that it was withered. Then Aldarion was dismayed, for such a thing had never befallen the bow of Oyolare, so long as it was washed with the spray. "It is frosted, captain," said a mariner who stood beside him. "It has been too cold. Glad am I to see the pillar." When Aldarion sought out Erendis, she looked at him keenly, but did not come forward to meet him, and he stood for a while at a loss for words, as was not his wont. "Sit, my lord," said Erendis, "and first tell me of all your deeds. Much must you have seen and done in these long years." Then Aldarion began, haltingly, and she sat silent, listening, while he told all the tale of his trials and delays. And when he ended, she said, "I thank the Valar, by whose grace you have returned at last. But I thank them also that I did not come with you, for I should have withered sooner than any green bow." "Your green bow did not go into the bitter cold by will," he answered. "But dismiss me now, if you will, and I think that men will not blame you. Yet dare I not to hope that your love will prove stronger to endure even than fair Oyolare?" "So it does prove indeed," said Erendis. "It is not yet chilled to the death, Aldarion. Alas! How can I dismiss you, when I look on you again, returning as fair as the sun after winter? "Then let spring and summer now begin," he said, "and let not winter return," said Erendis.